Well, good evening. This is Houndog Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening. And I came across this article from of2minds.com by Charles Hugh Smith, and it's called The Coming Revolt of the Middle Class. And it is really interesting how the middle class have basically allowed themselves to be gutted. How they haven't seen this coming, I have no idea. And I suspect that the big problem is complacency, that the middle class just thought that they could never be attacked, that they were the linchpin that held the upper class and the working class together. And of course we're finding out now that that is absolutely not true at all, and we're moving into a kind of neo-feudal system. Anyway, it's an interesting article, and it certainly gives us something to think about. The coming revolt of the middle class. The great American middle class has stood meekly by while the new nobility strip-mined $50 trillion from the middle and working classes. As this Rand report documents, $50 trillion has been siphoned from labour and the lower 90% of the workforce to the new nobility and their technocrat lackeys who own the vast majority of the capital. Why has the great American middle class meekly accepted their new role as debt serfs and powerless peasants in a neo-feudal economy ruled by the new nobility of big tech, monopolies, cartels and financiers? The basic answer is the new nobility's PR has been so persuasive and ubiquitous. Soaring inequality and neo-feudalism has nothing to do with us. It's just the natural result of technology and globalization, forces nobody can resist. Sorry about your debt serfdom, but hey, your student loan payment is overdue, so it's the rack for you. The recent Foreign Affairs article referenced here last week, Monopoly versus Democracy, describes the net results of the economic propaganda that the strip mining of the working middle classes was ordained and irresistible. Today Americans tend to see grotesque accumulations of wealth and power as normal. That's how far we have fallen. As the journalist Barry Lynn points out in his book, Liberty from All Masters, The New American Autocracy versus the Will of the People, the robber barons shared with today's high-tech monopolists a strategy of encouraging people to see immense inequality as a tragic but unavoidable consequence of capitalism and technological change. But as Lynn shows, one of the main differences between then and now is that, compared to today, few Americans accepted such rationalizations during the Gilded Age. Today, Americans tend to see grotesque accumulations of wealth and power as normal. Back then, a critical mass of Americans refused to do so, and they waged a decades-long fight for a fair and democratic society. And that, of course, was done through the unions and the unionization of the workplace, who fought for a fair wage for all of the working classes. And for a short while, basically from the 70s, basically the 60s, I would say the 60s up until 2000, the working class were keeping up with inflation, but that is no longer the case. And this has crept into the middle class, who thought they would escape this terrible, terrible consequence. The bottom 90% of the US economy has been decapitalized. Debt has been substituted for capital. Capital only flows into the increasingly centralized top tier, which owns and profits from the rising tide of debt that's been keeping the bottom 90% afloat for the past 20 years. As I've often observed here, globalization and financialization have richly rewarded the top 0.1% and the top 5% technocrat class that serves the new nobility's interests. Everyone else has been reduced to debt serfs and peasants who now rely on lotteries and luck to get ahead. Playing the stock market casino or hoping their mortgaged house in an urban sprawl on the left or right coast doubles in value, even as the entire value proposition for living in a congested urban sprawl vanishes. America has no plan to reverse this destructive tide of neo-feudal pillage. Our leadership's plan is benign neglect. Yep, benign neglect. That's what you just voted for. Benign neglect. Just send a monthly stipend of bread and circuses, the technocrat term is Universal Basic Income, or UBI, to all the disempowered, decapitalized households, urban and rural, so they can stay out of trouble and not bother the new nobility's pillaging of America and the planet. There's a lot of bright and shiny PR about rebuilding infrastructure and the Green New Deal, but our first question must always be, cui bono? To whose benefit? How much of the spending will actually be devoted to changing the rising imbalances between the haves and the have-nots, the ever richer who profit from the rising debt, and the ever more decapitalized debtors who are further impoverished by rising debt? And, this is kind of interesting because this is disaster capitalism at its best. If you want to read an excellent book or do some research on YouTube, look up Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This is an excellent book by John Perkins, and basically it describes how leaders of countries are compromised economically. They are forced to take loans which can never be repaid, and most of that money, which is supposed to go into infrastructure, actually ends up in the pockets of the relatives of these despots. And this is exactly what's going to happen here. The government will create all kinds of money, and of course this money will go to institutions who are supposed to put that out into the economy in infrastructure repairs and rebuilding contracts, and the people get paid, spend that back into the economy, and there is an economic recovery. Well, what's going to happen is that money will go to the big contractors and the corporations, and very, very, very little will trickle out at the bottom end. So the already wealthy will get once again compensated, and those who are on the treadmill will once again get trodden down. As I explained in my book, A Hacker's Teleology, Sharing the Wealth of Our Shrinking Planet, people don't want to just get by on UBI. They want an opportunity to acquire capital in all its forms, an opportunity to contribute to their communities, to make a difference, to earn respect and pride, and, of course, to get ahead. You might start off living in a shack or a one-bedroom apartment or so on and so forth, but most people, most families, aspire to living in a home that they own with a garden and to be able to raise children and put them through college and university so they might have a better life than the ones that they have experienced. And these neo-feudalists have no interest in your well-being. That our leadership reckons bread and circuses is what the strip-mined bottom 90% want is beyond pathetic. The middle class has meekly accepted the self-serving claim of the new nobility that the $50 trillion transfer of wealth was inevitable and beyond human intervention. But once the stock market and housing casinos collapse, the last bridge to getting ahead, high-risk gambling, will fall into the abyss, and the middle class will have to face their servitude and powerlessness. That's how neo-feudal systems collapse. The tax donkeys and debt serfs finally revolt and start demanding the $50 trillion river of capital take a new course. So I hope you enjoyed this article, and let that be a cautionary tale and a warning to all of the middle class people who think that this is not going to touch them or affect their lives in any way, shape or form. I really do wish that you would wake up and get over this idea that there is any kind of benefit from this kind of technocratic, globalistic leadership. And just for a second, think about what neo-feudalism actually means. Look up the word feudalism. Maybe watch a series on Netflix like The Last Kingdom and find out what it's like to live as a serf on a stipend, which means that you can barely survive. UBI is not designed to help you to get ahead. UBI is designed to stop you from falling so far behind that you cannot possibly keep up. So please do bear that in mind, folks, and do bear in mind also, as I said, there is no escape from this. Everyone will experience this unless we start speaking out. Or we'll just have to go through another great revolution to force the $50 trillion river of capital to take that new course. Okay, please, if you've enjoyed this, like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Houndog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we will talk very, very shortly. You take care now. Bye-bye.